Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to our podcast. Now, if you do not know the format of our podcast, what I do is me and a special guest sit down and we have a conversation about a single individual film. We kind of go in, say a little bit about the plot, maybe some spoilers, maybe not, but we kind of generally have a conversation about it, and that conversation can go in any direction or way or tangent. It just depends on the film and who stars in the film and how it was made. That being said, what you're about to hear now is a conversation about one film in a particular franchise, since we are releasing these as part of our franchise month. So we're going to delve deep into each film of this particular franchise. And the particular franchise we're discussing is the Final Destination franchise, and this is Final Destination, the first one from the year 2000. And the special guest I have to discuss this with me today is Philip Ray. We want to thank Philip for joining us again for our show. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you for having me.
It is good to have you back, especially considering that we had a discussion about Final Destination Bloodlines earlier in the year. So it's good to come back and kind of discuss the entire franchise as it developed, especially with this first film, because it was a game changer in many different ways. Now, I know I saw this movie at the theater when it originally came out 25 years ago. So by all means, everyone, this is also the 25th anniversary of this film. So that's another great thing to talk about. With you, Philip, what are your thoughts on this film? And did you watch it when it originally came out, or did you see it years later? How did it come about?
I saw it years later because I was definitely too young when the movie came out in theaters, but I ended up seeing it on TV, probably Sci-Fi Channel. But yeah, I saw it then, and I was very much like with everyone, very enraptured with the concept of the movie. Again, it was very clever idea, and I ended up watching most of the other Final Destination movies after this too. But yeah, the concept was very strong. Originally, this little trivia here, this originally was supposed to be just an episode of X-Files, but eventually they liked it so much that they were like, no, write a whole movie about this. And it's easily to see why they did that.
Yes, because I wanted to make sure I got these names right, because Jeffrey Reddick wrote the original screenplay, but then it was rewritten by James Wong and Glenn Morgan, who were from the X-Files directly. They produced a crap ton of episodes, and they were also worked on Chris Carter, who was creator of X-Files, other show, Millennium. So they were steeped into the mythology of X-Files, and that's how this works so well with all the changes that were done to the original screenplay.
Yeah.
So I will tell you this: since he saw this, he was too young to see this. Everybody, that young Philip Ray. Me, on the other hand, I saw this when it originally came out at the theater because of the X-Files kind of trivia part of it, as well as the cast. And I knew a lot of the cast members. They were these young cast members who were like popping up in all different types of movies and TV shows, especially Devon Sawa, who I still follow because I loved him in this movie. I loved him in Idle Hands, loved him in even the new Chucky series, which I think he's fucking hilarious in. But the guy has been around for a long time. He's like horror royalty, having starred in so much horror in his career. But also Ali Larter, who went off to do Heroes, and I think she's currently in Landman, which she's fucking brilliant in. But she's also another person who's been around a long time. Those are two actors I knew before going in to see this film. I knew a lot of the other actors either who had like little cameos, but those are the two main actors who I also watched a lot of other films and projects that they had done prior and after this film. So that was one of the main reasons I also saw the film. Now, what did you think of the film overall? Well, you know what? Let's take different aspects of this film, because everybody knows the kind of the concept, but some of the game-changing stuff in this film I want to discuss, which is, the whole idea of not having an actual physical death, but the presence of death, which is one of the major changes from the original screenplay to the final version of the film, and which has carried this franchise on for the last 25 years. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, no, that was definitely a smart idea. They definitely were that was a smart idea to not have a physical entity and instead having this. I mean, again, the thing with the Final Destination movies and why they are so good is because it instead of having this being, having basically anything potentially kills you. Again, the film series is so successful to a point with that is because it revolves around everyone's deepest fears, especially the first Final Destination did a good job with that. Again, the inciting incident with planes, I mean, everyone has gone on planes before and have felt at one point, with the turbulence or whatever, and they just felt like uncomfortable at times, or they worried about what if the plane goes down. Everyone's had a thought of that being on the plane, being on a plane. So, again, I think that's why the series is so smart with that, is that it relies so much on things that's like that could happen, that like everyone's had that creeping thought before.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will agree with you. I love the way that death's presence is made in the film, because we see things. This is probably the real suspense of the film, and why so many of the sequences work in this film is that Death has a sense of humor when he's killing these people one by one. He does them in really, really elaborate ways, and it's very comical and it plays with the audience, because the audience doesn't know which way that they're seeing is actually going to be the death of the person who death is going after, and or if that will be a permanent death or not. Sometimes they escape death, sometimes they don't. You never really know. That's one of the things that they play with a lot in the later films, but in this film, because the sequence of events only goes for one round, they don't like skip between people multiple different times. When death misses out on killing someone and it goes to the next person. What happens is that you see one of the death comes after each one once in the film, and by the time you get to the very end, when it's Kara's character, it's a complete shock that, oh no, they didn't save themselves. Oh, death just comes back around again. So you can't really escape death. I love that concept. Because
this movie definitely did a general good job in the end, setting up the rules that the other films expanded upon.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like every character ideally dying in the row of when they were supposed to die on the airplane and stuff. So again, that was done very smart. The only time I will make a complaint about the portrayal of death is for Todd's death in the shower. The little water the water going out was like, again, that was good, but the fact that the water went like sucked itself back in, I thought was a little cheesy. Because like for me, I was like, again, it was a good like, oh, because the thing too is when you're watching at the beginning, you're not fully sure about like, especially for a first time viewing, you're not fully sure, okay, is death actually after them, or is it just a whole thing of like unfortunate coincidences and stuff, until the water thing, and you see the water go like slurp back in, and I was like, that's my one complaint of Death's presence. I was like, I kind of wish the water would have stayed out, because again, it shows that like, oh, you can continue questioning, like, is this actually death after them, or is it just unfortunate coincidence?
Now, I had that as it happens, I think, twice. Was there, in fact, another part where it happened? I can't remember, but I noticed that too, because that's something that doesn't happen in any of the other films from what I remember. I think it only happens in this film because they were setting it up, and then someone said, oh, wow, we don't really like that rule, so we're just going to ignore it for the rest of the films. Because I had forgotten about that until I rewatched it. I was like, oh, yeah. I forgot it did that in the first, because it's been 20 plus years since I've seen this film, so I've completely forgotten about that. And of course, there's been now 5 films after that. That's one of the rules that was broken, and it does. That's about the only thing I did not. It doesn't take me out of the film, but it's something I noticed 25 years later in all these other films, that since they ignored it for like the other films, it's striking. It's like, oh, you wish you could go back and just edit that little sequence out.
Yeah, because again, like there's no again, it looks a little like Looney Tunes-esque with the water just going whoop. Like you talking about earlier, of it being like dark funny. I'm like, I guess that's a way of it being kind of like dark humor, but like, and not in a good way, because it's just like it's like, oh, that's all, folks. Like water goes away.
The humor always comes in this film in the ways that get killed. He gets strangled while accidentally falling into the shower, and then Miss Luton, who thinks that she's saving herself by telling on Devon Sawa's character Alex, thinks she's safe, and all of a sudden she gets this freaking huge bloody knife stuck in her and a huge explosion and everything else. Like I keep forgetting that she was playing such a scaredy cat. The actress, Cloak, I think is her last name, Kristen
Yes.
Cloak. I'm trying to remember all this.
That was also a weird death too, because like that death could have been a little more gorier, because they had a moment where she's trying to pull on the towel, and you're thinking like, oh geez, like all these knives are about to skewer her, and they all fall, and only one manages to hit her, but it hits her, like impales her on the side. But it was like, I think nowadays, if they remade this movie, she would have been skewered with all of those knives. But back then, it was a little weird how kind of tame her death was, in that sense of like only one knife just hit her and the rest of them just miss her somehow.
Well, it's an escalation of deaths. You got to remember that Todd dies just by getting strangling himself, so to speak.
Yeah.
But by the very end, when Kara's character gets smashed by a freaking sign, you're like, oh shit!
Yeah.
You don't even see that one, but you can just feel it when you're like. I remember at the end of and when I watched this in the theater, I had that oh shit screaming at the screen that they actually did that. I was like, fuck.
Yes. Which, yeah, that will again, the ending too was very iconic. I will say, of the actors, one talking about one negative thing, talking about the comedy, is uh I didn't really like the Carter character, and it was the stereotypical, because originally, again, a change in screenplay that I understand. Again, they were jumping off originally the plot was supposed to be adult, but then because Scream came out and it was so successful, the studio made them change all the actors to be younger and stuff. Which I would have been interested to see the adult version of this, but the kid version's also kind of fine in the settings and stuff. But like the Carter character was kind of like again, and that was a lot of times in the early 20s, the stereotypical bully character that was just like obnoxiously like the bully character and stuff.
Well,
Uh,
he's a jock, but he's also the character who won't. You have to have that character in there because you're talking about a film that's talking about fate and death and people who can control. That's why there's always this one character who thinks he can control his fate. And you always have to have that one. It's kind of a contrasting moment because he's got to be different than everyone else. It's the same for Final Destination 2. The one character who thinks he can control his own fate and even tries to pull the trigger on his own self and commit suicide, but death won't let it happen. That character is kind of like, it's a cliche to have in there, but you have to have it in there to show contrast to the other characters. I think that with this film, the Carter character thinks that he's above everyone else until, of course, he gets shot in the face by the fact that everyone around him is dying and his girlfriend just got smashed by a fucking bus.
yeah, which again, the funny thing is that was one of the originators of like the whole silent bus death, that like the silent vehicle, like you have a giant vehicle that somehow you don't hear coming until the very last second. When this movie did it, it was fine because again, like it was one of the originators, because when that death happens, it's effective because you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
because not a lot of movies had done it at the time. Unfortunately, now in horror movies, they do that all the time, and now everyone's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. How do you not hear a giant bus coming, like coming at all? Like but in this movie I think it's done fine. But if anyone who watches it now, you have to remember that that was unique when that movie came out. That had
Yeah.
not happened before.
Yeah, unfortunately, the early 2000s, especially when this came out, where not only the time where everyone was trying to be like Scream and come up with clever characters and stuff, but they also had um, there's not that many movies from this era that were effective and or like defining of that whole era. Final Destination and Scream are two of the ones that actually have surpassed that era until now. Actually, I guess since they've resurrected both franchises.
Yeah.
They were both effective, but if you go back and look at those early 2000 films, there's a lot of them out there that tried certain techniques and experimented with techniques like that were not successful. Unfortunately, thankfully, we haven't gotten through many of those yet. Yet, I say on our podcast, but that's one of the things you have to look at. You know, we were coming out of the '90s into the 2000s, and people were throwing everything at the fucking wall to see what audiences wanted. Thankfully, this movie actually did its job better than expected.
Yep, it was definitely a success, and so again, it did great in the box office. So again, which I mean, again, that's great, and obviously, like, definitely later on, like, I do think some of the series later on kind of lost its way with that, which is why Bloodlines was very good about that. But yeah, there's a lot of good things too about this. Now I have to ask you, Kevin.
Yes.
What was your favorite death in the movie?
My favorite death in the movie was probably Seann William Scott. Mostly because I don't like Seann William Scott, so watching him die was always fun for me. I'd say I like him now. Don't get me wrong, I like him now. Back then, I hated him. I hated every movie he was in. I couldn't stand him. I forgotten when I rewatched it he was even in the movie, and I was like, well, he plays a much different character than normal because
yeah. I was gonna say with Seann William Scott, it's a surprise because he at this point had already did his breakout character of Steve Stidler from American Pie, and he's very tamed in this movie.
He is. It's almost like he's the nerd that no one wants to speak to, and he's the guy who like, he goes up to Alex. Was it after the funeral, asking, how am I gonna die? All these like Alex is gonna know exactly how he's gonna die. He's like some fucking psychic or some shit. And then, of course, the way that this movie is written, which I actually really like, is that all these characters involved that survived Flight 180 happenstance end up in the same spot, and then someone dies horribly. When Carter's girlfriend gets smashed by the bus, they all happen to be there with the teacher Luton, who you would not even know she'd be there. And of course, as their numbers dwindle, it gets smaller and smaller. I mean, Seann William Scott's character probably would have never been in the car with them to even be anywhere near Carter stopping the bus on the train tracks if it wasn't for happenstance, really. And of course, he gets the unexpected death because everyone's looking at Carter to die by the train, and all of a sudden you see these little piece of the wreck that comes flying right back and slicing him to bits. And I was completely shocked by that when I originally saw that. This film has a good sense of setups that death does, and then there's these shocking deaths, and it does a really good job of balancing those out. So it keeps surprising you as the audience as you're watching it.
Yeah, you do not see again. Yeah, you don't see things coming. Again, it does a good establish of the rules and stuff. That again, that's one I would say a lot of positive things with the movie is it does such a great setup of the rules. Again, that's why it makes the other series are able to build on that, and that's a good sign of a horror movie to be able to do that.
Yeah. And the fact that it uses some elements of a mystery in there, because Alex is stuck trying to figure out what is Death's plan. And so you watch him as he goes through and he figures these small little details out one by one. And that actually adds to my enjoyment of the film. And I was rewatching it. I was like, oh, yeah, holy shit, this was a much smarter movie than I remembered it being.
A lot better than the other ones where they start like relying on like, oh, the main character continuously has premonitions or other stuff like that.
Yeah. Yes. No, you picked up on the one thing I kind of when I rewatched the second one, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. I don't stuff like that. I was like, why is she having premonitions? This is so stupid. But yes, I like the fact that the way this one played up the whole thing was very dynamic. It ended up with actors that could play it all off. There's not, in my opinion, there is not a weak actor in the bunch because they all seem like high school kids in this movie. They don't seem like 20 somethings playing high school kids. So even though I don't like Sean William Scott, he seemed like a little high schooler who just wants to know, oh, well, dude, you figured it all out. You saved us all. When am I gonna die? When am I gonna die? And of course, Carter, being the jock, is like no one controls my fate but me, and so he plays chicken, which I like that version much better than in the second film where the guy just wants to take the gun and commit suicide. Um, there's certain things that this film does much better than
Now,
I
one
remember.
thing that they introduced that was interesting that they never, and I get the idea a little bit of it because it would, it halts the movie a little bit, but then it's kind of like, then why do you even introduce it? Is the FBI agents. Like, so,
Mhm.
because the concept of them being like, everyone's dying around you, you're up to something, is could have been an interesting idea, and I understand why they ended up not going further into it because it would have muddied Alex trying to be in all these locations. But it also comes to me at the same point as like, well, then why did you introduce it in the first place then? Because it feels very it feels half developed.
I was trying to figure out, and this is probably a bad thing, or I forgot to go back and research this. I was trying to figure out when we started as a nation. We're having all those school shootings and those random violence at schools, and I was wondering if that was part of the plan with them trying to make a comment on that, since it was doing a comment on death and everything else. But I never went back and did the research I wanted to. I wrote a note about it in my notes, and I was like, shit, I forgot to go back and check because that would be an interesting reason why you'd have those FBI agents in there. Because you're right. Why are they? I mean, they don't really push the story that much. They kind of ask the questions that the audience already knows from Alex's perspective, and the fact that we see death, like you said, with the scene in which the water comes back after Todd's death. If we had not had that scene, I could see maybe there being like a reason for the FBI agents to be there, but because the audience knows that death has a reason for the death, and it couldn't like just be happenstance. I think it's a weird reason to have the police officers there.
I mean, so there was, I guess, like the close to the time, the Columbine.
I was trying to remember when that was. I couldn't remember.
Columbine happened a year before the movie came out,
Uh-huh.
but again, and that could have been an interesting angle if they want to go that route. But again, it's kind of half developed because they don't actually do that. They don't even reference that type of idea in this movie.
They could have cut it out also, like they
And
did. Well,
yeah,
like they did with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode that was cut because of the same reason, the Columbine incident, and then they aired it years later. Or when the Twin Towers went down for terrorist bombings, and they replaced the entire trailer for Spider-Man because the original trailer for Spider-Man had Spider-Man flying through the Twin Towers. That got X'd completely, and they went back to digitally remove the Twin Towers in the entire film because of it. Even though we were going through a lot of shit at that time, and who knows what the other reasons for these story aspects of there. And that could be stuff that was cut out completely. You're right, though. It does seem weird to have them in there because their only job is to tell Alex that no, we believe that you might be responsible, but we're not 100% sure if you're responsible or not, or it could be just coincidence. But we're gonna keep investigating regardless. That's pretty much what they're there for. They don't know, but until after Luton dies, then they blame him for her death.
yeah.
Because
What I guess that's the reason why they do only the one knife for her, so that way it could be pinned. But again, it's like okay, but then it doesn't feel like it follows through with that idea in the end. So then it becomes a okay, what's the point?
well,
Uh,
yeah, because it gets dropped. because it's
Yeah.
no longer part of the actual plot anymore, in theory, unless those scenes were cut. It doesn't really drive the plot at all after that. And then the characters don't really pay much attention for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and it's not something, and they don't establish that at all with any of the Final Destination movies. So it's like, through a retrospect sense, it's kind of an interesting idea of like the main character getting blamed for all these deaths because he's near them. But again, it's like, but then they kind of give up and like, I don't know. I mean, again, they'll probably do another Found Destination after Bloodlines. But honestly, it's not a bad concept of having of a Found Destination movie where the main character is getting blamed for all of these deaths because he's trying to prevent them, but he's there, and no one's going to believe him going, "Oh, well, Death's trying to it's killing us all." Like, so it could be an interesting idea down the line, but yeah, it's very feels like a missed opportunity.
Well, that also could be some of the remnants from the original screenplay where it was trying to be like the X Files episode, and that's what you have those two FBI agents there.
Yeah.
It's a remnant from that. But we won't know until we listen and watch a behind the scenes documentary or something that has to deal with this film and or discuss it with the writer. Both
Yep.
Jeffrey Reddick and the James Wong and Darren Morgan. I think it was Darren Morgan, James Wong.
So, another, you mentioned Spider-Man, and that's a great segue for this other nice trivia. So originally, Tobey Maguire and Kristen Dunst were supposed to be Alex and Clear. They ended up not being casted, and then they ended up going and being obviously going to Spider-Man. But it's funny that we almost, instead of giving them together in Spider-Man, we almost got them together with this movie.
For some reason, that seems like a really hard sell for Tobey Maguire. Oh, given his entire career of types of movies he's done, Kirsten Dunst has done other horror movies, so I wouldn't put that behind her. But Tobey Maguire, that seems like a really wow.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think Devin did a great job as Alex, so
Mhm.
I'm not that doesn't I don't mind that too much. But it is a funny of what if of getting them here before we got them in Spider-Man. Probably if they did them here, realistically, we would have not got them together in Spider-Man. They probably would have casted someone different in one of the roles, if not both of them.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. This isn't. Yeah, I can.
Because you don't want to have the same associate. You don't have that same association. So again, I think if I had to choose between the two, having them in Spider-Man was definitely a better pick than having them together here in Final Destination.
Yeah, I think they did fine with Devin Sawa and Ali Larter. Of course, Ali Larter was in the second one. And then, of course, they just wrote off Devin Sawa's character who gets killed by a brick. I
Yeah.
had forgotten that until I rewatched the second. I was like, oh shit, that's how they wrote him off the movie. I forgot. I was like, oh my god, he gets hit by a brick.
Yep. So in the original script, one of the original endings, it was actually going to end a lot differently. It was going to be basically Devin was going to have impregnated Allie's character, and then Alex actually dies in the movie. Like, so at the end of the movie, he actually does end up getting killed trying to save Clear, and then technically by her like introducing life, back then at least the idea was that she had cleared death, but of course the Carter character was still alive at the end, so that doesn't explain why he stayed alive obviously. So they changed the ending to this, which is definitely a better call long
Oh
term.
yeah, yeah. I'd heard that they had done other endings or ending, but I had never like I didn't know I hadn't done any research to figure out what the hell the other endings were because there's so many horror movies out there that go through test screenings and they change the endings for inexplicable ways and reasons.
But yeah, that was the original ending. The original ending was that Alex and Clear would have a kid together, and Alex was going to die on screen. He was going to be electrocuted to death at the end of this movie, uh, but the Clear was going to have a kid from this.
Yeah, that even seems really fucking far fetched.
Yeah, it is very far-fetched because the problem too was that they were going to do a time skip with it too. So it was just yeah, I mean, it's very understandable why they changed it because it was just it feels weird to do.
They'll just do a time jump like they did at the very beginning, right after I didn't realize this till I rewatched it, that after the plane crash, they do a 39-day time jump for the funeral or the revealing of the memorial for all those that passed on flight 180. I was like, oh, yeah, it wasn't immediate. It's like a whole more than a month after. Oh shit.
Yep. And then another unintentional thing the movie does sequel movies did from this is the 180 number, which suddenly became the hot number for the rest of the sequels, where it's like, oh look, 180, look, that means something bad's gonna happen, which it's a little hokey in my opinion.
Well, it is, but also remember that the original script, I believe, was called Flight 180 before they finally found a different title for it.
Yeah, which was wise. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm actually very curious. I think the problem, I mean, it's kind of it had to happen. Kind of like what happened with Jaws when that came out, and probably less people. Actually, funny enough, my mom is one of those people that stopped going to the ocean after Jaws because it traumatized her too much. That she, nah, I'm not going to swim. I'm wondering how much of effect Final Destination had on people going on planes for a while.
I don't know. Jaws was like the start of the whole blockbuster movie era and summer blockbuster movie era, and it was seen by everyone. I don't think Final Destination was seen by everyone, but it was seen by a good amount of people.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have a figure in front of you regarding how much it made? I have no idea.
Yeah, Final Destination made 112.9 million dollars.
Domestic or worldwide?
Let me see. That is
I should look these up more often, but I usually rely on you and Panazzo to look at these figures.
domestically it made 53, internationally it made 59.
Hmm. Probably on the budget that was probably like $5 to $10 million.
Budget was 23, so
Really? So that was a healthy budget for Glenn Morgan and James Glenn Morgan and James Wong, who I think this was their first film upon leaving from X Files. I think they went off to do lots of other great horror movies, but I believe that this was their first one.
um
Or was it's not the one? The one wasn't it?
yes, yeah, that's correct. This was their first movie
Yeah,
after getting off X-Files.
yeah, yeah. And then after this, they kind of had a lot of other great movies before they split up, and then I think they both went back to television eventually. But I no longer pay much attention to them because they haven't done any feature films so in a while. But
Yeah, yep. So Final Destination was James Wong's first movie
mhm,
after X-Files. And again, like did a good job with that.
mhm.
But yeah, I mean, and honestly, the budget's not too surprising because I mean, again, the plane explosion scene alone, I mean, gosh, had to be so expensive. Um, that beginning scene is done so well.
It holds
Um,
up really well too.
it does. Honestly, a lot of the CGI in this movie holds up really well. Um, Nothing looks too hokey or fake. And apparently they use a lot of fake blood in the movie, and like I mean it does a good job with that. So
Okay. So, moving on even further into the Final Destination part one, I'm trying to figure out any more details of things because everyone out there is listening. We did not go through a lot of plot for this one because we're assuming that a lot of you actually have seen this film. This one, because there's 5, 6 movies now in the franchise, 6 movies.
I think
Going through all the details of the first film isn't nearly as important as doing that with sequels because most people have seen the first film. It's the sequels that most people haven't bothered to watch.
Also, another like ended up being smart casting long term is Tony Todd. The
Oh
introduction of
yes, let's talk about
Todd
something.
as Bloodworth was again. It's as hokey as it a little bit is to have a character again be having a character that basically explains all the stuff, which again has a good payoff long term with that. Again, Tony Todd is phenomenal. So anytime, and he's and it so it's was great to have him like them introduce them casting Tony Todd in this movie, and then keeping him throughout the rest of the series.
So, so this is true. This was the one thing that pissed me off when I saw the movie. So I'm a huge Tony Todd fan. Always have been since he played in the 1990 version of Night of the Living Dead, which I thought he was fucking phenomenal in. And so I kind of watched his career as he went from movies like The Crow to this, Candyman, and so on and so forth. He made a career of doing a lot of great movies that I loved. But and of course, he was advertised as being in Final Destination. And so I saw this movie at the theater, and he's in it for like 5 minutes. And for the entire time I'm watching this theater, I'm kind of wondering when he's coming back because I'm like, he's only in it for 5 minutes. Where the fuck is Tony Todd at? Look here about no one else. Where the fuck is Tony Todd at? I was so pissed. I get to the end of the movie, I'm like, good movie, but Tony Todd's not in it enough. He's only in it for 5 minutes. Of course, that happens in the second movie too, and I thought, motherfuckers, you got me twice. He's only in for 5 minutes again. All right, motherfuckers. Because this is an actor, in my opinion, who has done some amazing work, but he's never gotten the accolades that I think he should have, especially with the characters that he portrayed in Candyman movies. Because unfortunately, none of them were nearly as good as the original that Bernard Rose, I think it's Bernard Rose, wrote and directed. I think I'm getting confused now because it's been so long since I've seen Candyman. But that was one of the films I grew up watching as a kid. That Night of the Living Dead, and I saw Tony Todd. Just was like one of my things is I wish I had gotten to meet him at like a horror convention, but never did. But like Tony Todd, he was the man back then. At least for me, he was. He was the man. So it was a little that was probably the most disheartening thing when I watched this at the theater in 2025 years ago. Like Tony Todd's not in it enough. He's got 5 fucking minutes. Like Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will agree that he may have only 10 minutes in the new one, but it's the fucking great 10 minutes that he does with what little time he has in the Bloodlines movie. It was absolutely brilliant. It ties up all of these films in this franchise so beautifully. So I can't say much. I mean, he's into almost all of the sequels from what I remember. I think there's one, maybe two that he's not in. I can't remember, but we will discover that as we rewatch these episodes for the show.
Yep.
Are there any final words you'd like to say about the first Final Destination film?
Basically, again, it was a thing where like it was very, again, it's overall it does have some of its problems, but overall as a Kickstarter to a horror franchise, I think it was done very well with a very smart plot, a very mostly solid script. Again, there's a reason why it was able to have multiple six movies at right now. We're recording the six movies. I mean, it makes sense. Unfortunately, and again, as we see with the later sequels, they kind of lose a little bit of what made this first movie so solid. But yeah, no, it's definitely a really good movie.
Okay. So I would like to second everything he says about this movie. I think it holds up extremely well. After 25 years since it's released and about 22 years since I last saw it, the movie actually shines pretty damn well. 25 years ago, I can say that I was not paying as much attention to some of these details as I was when I rewatched it for the podcast. That being said, if you haven't seen this movie in a while, it's always good to revisit certain films, especially in order to get a better sense of how they have not only aged and progressed, but how good they originally were with hindsight. you're older, you understand these the concepts the filmmakers were originally trying to go with much better out of the second or third or fourth viewing. So I always encourage people to go back and watch these films over and over again, at least a couple times, even the bad ones, which is what we're going through the franchise, and there's bound to be one or two that just don't make the cut. But you'll hear us talk about those later. But for everyone out there, we like to rate the movies 1 to 5, 1 being poor, 5 being excellent, in order to get a better and clearer idea of where these films stand in the pantheon of horror films. Where on the spectrum do you place this movie, Philip?
I give it a 3.5. Again, it's it has a lot of solid things about it. There's a couple of missteps throughout that could have been done better, with some story and with some characters, at least for me, but still very good, very solid horror movie.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 4, actually, because I think it's better than what I remembered it being. I was younger, 25 years younger, when I originally saw this. So the ideal of this being able to stand everyone, I don't actually watch these type of films with young actors and teenager type horror films anymore. They were part of my culture 25 years ago, but they are not now. And so therefore I rarely find them all that interesting like I was when I was younger. This one I believe still holds up extremely well, except for the couple of times that me and Philip had discussed that we thought it would have been better if they just cut that whole sequence of the water going back in, make it seem more ominous and ambiguous, stuff like that. But those are small, those are minor gripes. And they actually fixed that issue with the sequel. So I'm gonna give it 4. I will highly recommend this one. I will not always do that with other films in the franchise, but for this one I do recommend anyone who has never seen this film to go seek it out. And for anyone who has seen this film but hasn't seen it in a very long time like I haven't, go check it out again, because I believe that you will find a new appreciation for this film. Now, with that, I want to thank you, Philip, for joining us on Conversations in Horror while we discussed Final Destination from the year 2000. For everyone out there, we hope that you will seek out other episodes that we have been discussing in the past, and especially of the Final Destination franchise, because this is all part of our franchise month. So there's going to be plenty of stuff out there for you. We hope that you check them all out, whether you've seen the other films in the franchise or not. Check them out. You never know what you're going to hear from our mouths on this podcast. You can listen to podcasts on your favorite podcast app, Spotify and YouTube. Also, make sure to check out our sister podcast, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast, Conversations in 4 Color. That is about manga, comic books, and graphic novels. From all of us here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we hope you have a very pleasant day and keep listening to those episodes. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.